This is Mr. Fisher, and I'm doing a video on converting between fractions, decimals, and percents. I hope you like it. First of all, fractions, decimals, and percents are three different ways to show an amount. I don't know if you've ever realized this, but we can use any of these three forms to show a number. So we can show it with fractions. We can use the fraction bar. We've got a numerator on top, denominator on bottom, and we can have, for example, in this case, fourths, but we could have thirds, we could have halves, we could have fifths, whatever you want really for that bottom number. Then we come over to decimals. Decimals are the second way to show a number. And we've got the decimal point, which is really important. Anything to the left of the decimal point represents whole numbers. Anything to the right of the decimal point represents fractional amounts, so little pieces. And thirdly, we've got percents. We can show everything in terms of 100. 25%, whenever you see that little symbol, remember that just means everything's in terms of 1, 0, 0. So everything's related to 100. Three different ways to show numbers. Here are those same fractions again, but this time we can relate them to real things. So for example, these all could represent 25 cents over here, or the red part of the pie. So 1/4, 1/4 in money, 1/4 of the pie, 1 out of 4 pieces. 0.25 in decimal. And we've got, so 0.25 of a dollar, or 0.25 out of 1. The whole pie would represent 1 full pie. Lastly, percent. We could do it with the percent symbol. 25% could be 25% of a dollar. 25 out of 100, in other words. Or 25 out of 100 pieces contained in a pie. Here's another familiar amount. You probably know pretty well. We've got 1/2 in fraction, we've got 0.5 in decimal, and we've got 50% in percent form. So notice they're all redundant, just like 1/4, 0.25, and 25%. These all would represent the same amount. If it was a pie, it would be half of the pie filled up. Next. Let's do some converting. So percents to decimals, to change percents to decimals, just move the decimal 2 times to the left. So let's try this. We would take this 4.5 here that we see over in the percents, and we're going to move this decimal 2 times to the left. Here's the new decimal point. That'll be a 0 right here. We would get rid of that old decimal point, and we could also eliminate this percent sign, and we'll have 0.045. That's all you do. So to change percent to decimal, just move it 2 times to the left. I usually have my students just remember like a little saying or a little mnemonic, just keep on saying it over and over again, which is percent to decimal, 2 to the left. Percent to decimal, 2 to the left. Memorize something that you can remember for a test. So let's do the next one. For example, 180%, okay, 180%. We've got the decimal point normally would be right here. Remember, if it's invisible, it's on the right side. If you don't see it, it's always on the right side. For example, this would be like 180.0. And then we're going to take that decimal again, 2 to the left, move it 2 times to the left. Our new decimal point will be between the 1 and the 8. We'll get rid of the old one, get rid of the percent symbol. We're going to have 1.8. We could retain that 0 if we felt like it. It's not that big a deal. Even this other 0 up here, up on top, we could maintain as well. Okay, go ahead and do it yourself. Do those next two. Find the decimal points, move them 2 times to the left, and you will have changed them into percents. Into decimals. Remember to pause your video. I'll give you a second to pause it. Okay, I'm thinking that you did it already, so let me just check your answers. We had a decimal point right here. Whenever you don't see it, it's always on the right side. You move it 2 times to the left. That means your decimal point is going to be 0.75. You lose the percent symbol. Okay. Then on 20%, The decimal point's on the right side as well. We move it 2 times to the left, and we have 0.20. Or 0.2. You could get rid of that 0. And I guess a real quick note on that, on what we were just talking about, we've got, like I said, we could get rid of this 0 here. We could get rid of the 0 on the 1.8. And even still, if we felt like it, if you're in a rush, I mean, you don't have to write this 0 even here on this one here at the top. And so things get a little simpler when you omit some of these zeros that are floating off, you know, trailing off to the left or trailing off to the right. That's an option for you. Okay, so now what about converting from decimals to percents? Now just a second ago, wait, what do we know so far? We did percents to decimals. Remember, 2 to the left. Now we're going to go decimals to percents. We're just going to go the opposite direction. So we're going to take our decimal point, and now in this case, on the first one, our decimal point's going to be over here. We're going to have to move this time just 2 times to the right and add the percent symbol. So you'd move it 2 times to the right. Here's the new one. Add your zeros in to fill these spots. Get rid of the old one. Rewrite it, 5000. Now, there's a decimal point right here, but that's usually the invisible position, so I'm just going to make that invisible. Get rid of that, and add the percent sign. And we're done. We just changed decimal to percent. Okay? Okay, so let's do, I'll have you do the next ones. They're pretty easy, so this time we're just going the opposite of our rule. Remember, our rule is 2 to the left. To change, right, percent to decimal, 2 to the left. And now you're just going to do that the opposite way. I'll give you a second. Go ahead and pause your video and do it. Okay, I'm thinking now that you finished this up, so let's just review the answers. We're going to go 2 to the right each time and then add the percent symbol. So 2 to the right. Here's my new decimal point, and I've got, you know, 0.99, a decimal point, and a percent. Do I need the decimal point? No, because there's nothing to the right of it, so I don't need that. I'm going to get rid of that decimal point, and I'm going to get rid of this 0. It's one of those floating zeros that's not sandwiched by anything, by any non-zero digits, so we can just get rid of that. Okay, let's do the next one. We've got the number 1. Okay, so where's the decimal point on that? The decimal point is on the right. Remember, if you don't see it, it's always on the right, and we need to move it 2 times to the right. Here's the new decimal point. Add in some zeros right here. Get rid of the old decimal point. And so we've got, it's kind of a funny looking decimal point. There we go, 100 point. Now wait, do we need this point right there? No. So we'll erase that. And we'll go ahead and we'll put in the percent sign. And we're done. Okay, next, 1.5. What's that going to change to? We move it 2 to the right. Here's our new decimal point. Put in a 0. Now we can add the percent symbol and everything, so it's 150. 150. Our decimal point we don't have to show, it's on the right there. We can make it invisible, that's its invisible position, and add the percent symbol, and we're done. So we just changed decimals to percents. Maybe we erase this just so you can see what we've done now. So in each case, we've moved the decimal points twice to the right. Okay, so now we've had 2 rules. We know percent to decimal is 2 to the left. Decimal to percent is just the opposite. And now we go to fractions to percents. How do you change fractions to percents? Well, you divide them. Okay, you just remember that the little fraction bar, as it says above, the little fraction bar always can mean division. Okay, so when you look at a fraction like this, this is 1 over 2, which is actually called 1/2. But you can also think of that fraction bar as meaning division. Whenever you want to, that little fraction bar can mean division. And what we'll do now is we'll either do it on the calculator or do it on paper, and you'll do 1 divided by 2. So that means, that bar means division, so we're going to divide. So let's do that over here on the left side. We'll go 1 divided by 2. Now wait, which one goes inside the little division bracket? The 1 goes on the inside, the 2 goes on the outside, and we divide. So we go decimal point here, mark our decimal point, put a 0. 2 goes into 10 5 times, and we've got our answer. So that's where this 0.5 over here came from. That 0.5 came from the fact that we divided just 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. Next, we already studied how to change decimal to percent, so we will move this decimal point 2 times to the right. There's our new decimal point. Get rid of the old one and put in a 0 right there. We don't need this 0 anymore over here, and we've got 50 point percent. And of course this point right here, 50 point, we don't need, so we'll clean that up, and we've got 50%. Okay, so let's try one more real quick. So we've got, let's do this next one, 3/5. So again, what is, yeah, I know normally you would read this as 3/5, but we're going to say it's 3 divided, whenever you want to, just say that bar means division. So that's 3 divided by 5. So again, we'd go 3 divided by 5, mark our decimal point, put in a 0. 5 goes into 36 times, so that'll be 0.6. And again, the 0 on the left side is optional. And then we're going to go ahead and move that decimal 2 times to the right, and we'll get 60 point, although it's invisible, 60 point percent. Okay, this is where you stop your video again and give the next ones a try. Okay, so now you've had a second to do these, so you should have said 7 divided by 8 over here, 7 divided by 8, and you will have gotten 0.78, I'm sorry, 875.875. Again, this 0 is kind of optional, but they often include it in textbooks, but when you're doing things fast, you don't really need that. And you're going to see that that decimal disappears anyway. So we're going to move that decimal 2 times to the right, and we're going to get 87.5%. So that should have been your percent. This decimal point we have to show over here because it's separating that 7 from the 5, and that's important. To give it, the correct place values, to give the digits their correct places. And okay, next up, let's do the next guy here. We got 2 divided by 3 right here. So 2 divided by 3, you should have gotten a repeating decimal, 0.666. Okay, and again, you could put a 0 there if you felt like it. That's a repeater. We could put the bar on it temporarily just to show that it truly does repeat. We're going to move that decimal 2 times to the right. We're going to get 66.6%. So that's an approximation. That's not complete again. Approximately 66.6%, because that's going to keep going 66.666666, and it will never end, right? To infinity. So approximately 66.6%. Okay. And we've just done fractions to percent. So once again, a fraction, you remember that the division bar, any time you see the division bar, it means divide. That little fraction bar, every time you see the fraction bar, you can divide. Okay, next, percents to fractions. Well, percents to fractions, the word percent, if you break it up, means per hundred. So if you think of the word per means divided by, so we get the little fraction bar. And then if you think of the word cent, cent means 100. So what it means is it's per 100. So if you put these two together, it's always per 100. Every time it's per, there's the per, and then 100. Okay, so let's do these. We're going to, for example, 25%. We're going to change from percents over here to fractions. So it'll say 25, then we say per, and we get 100. There's per, that says percent, and we did it. All we have to do now is just reduce it. So 25 goes into 25 once, 25 goes into 100 4 times, and now we've got our fraction. Note, we wouldn't leave it as 25 over 100 or 25 hundredths, because that is not simplified, and that would not be useful as an answer. However, you can use it for math, it's just not good for an answer. Okay, so let's do the next guy. So we've got 30%, so that'll be, well, again, 30, and then per. What's per? The bar. Cent is 100, so 30 per 100, it's always in terms of 100. Okay, and now we're going to reduce that. Well, okay, you can divide both of these by 10, so 10 goes into 30 3 times. 10 goes into 100 10 times. And we're ready to go. Again, here's where you stop the video. Go ahead and you can change percents to fractions by just putting it over 100 and reducing it. Okay, so I think you're done now, and you've finished this up. So let's do it. You paused your video. So 2% would be 2, and then per, and then 100. And then you'd reduce that. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 100 50 times. So we got 1/50th. So 2% is the same as 1/50th. Next we've got 120%. And so we're going to, again, we could put this over 100. So it's going to be 120, and our per, and then cent, or 100, over 100. And now this one's a little bit different. Matter of fact, I don't know why I really put it in here, but you could still change it into a fractional form. So, but since we have the top number, the numerator is bigger, this means that we have at least one whole number that's kind of stuck up there in the top. So we're going to divide this. 120 divided by 100. 100 goes into 120 one time, with 20 left over 100. And then we would just reduce that fraction right there. 20 goes into 20 once. 20 goes into 100 5 times. And then reunite those two pieces over here, and we'll have 1 1/5. So you should have gotten 1 1/5 for 120%. I know I kind of threw that at one in. Okay, next. Decimals to fractions. Just read the number in decimal form, but then write it in fraction form. So this takes kind of a different skill. You've got to be able to realize that you're going to have, if we look at this first fraction right here, 0.12, 0.12, or people would probably call it 0.12. But in math, we know the places here. So this is the tenths place, this is the hundredths place, and then over here is the thousandths place. So that's the key to this, right? You have the tenths, we've got the hundredths, and we've got the thousandths. When you read these, it's all according to those places. What you want to do is read the number normally, and then go down below to find the place of the last digit that you read, and use that number like we have up above it. Okay, so for example, we're going to look at this 2 here. And because when we read it, we're going to say 12, but we're going to focus on that last digit there. So it's 0.12, but that 2 is the one that we really care about. So that'll be 12, and it's in the hundredths place, right? That's going to be in the hundredths place, right? Because it's saying 12, it's not thousandths, there's no digit right now in the thousandths place. So we've got 2 hundredths. That's our last guy we read when we say the number 12, so that's going to be 12 hundredths. Now after we read it, then you can change it into your fraction. We're going to go from decimals over here to fractions. So we've got 12 hundredths, and now we just write it as a fraction, 12 over 100. And then you'd reduce it. So we'd say 4 goes into 12 3 times, 4 goes into 100 25 times, and we're done. Okay, I'll have you do the next 3 on your own. Go ahead and pause your video and do the next 3, and you're going to go ahead and again read the number normally, and the last digit that you read, just read the place value from up above for that particular digit. Okay, so I'm thinking you paused your video, you did this, so let's talk now. We'll have 0.75, well that'll be 7 is in the tenth spot, but the 5 is what we're going to read, so that's going to be hundredths again, right? 75 hundredths, we go ahead and write it like that, 75, but now we put it in fraction form, 75 over 100. And we reduce it. 25 goes into 75 3 times, 25 goes into 100 4 times, and there's our fraction, 3/4. Okay, next, 0.4. 0.4, normally we would just say 0.4 so everybody understands, but really the 4 is in the tenths position, so this is going to be 4 tenths, 4 tenths, and now you're just going to reduce that, so 2 goes into 4 twice, 2 goes into 10 5 times. 2/5 is our fractional form. Next, our last one, 1.25. So this time the 1 will be separate, that's our whole number. And then we'll just read our 0.25 normally. So we've got a 2 in the tenths position, we've got a 5 in the hundredths, that'll be 25 hundredths. And then we go ahead and write that. So 1 and 25 hundredths. And we'd reduce 25 hundredths, that's 1/4. So it's 1 1/4. And we're done. Well, now we're done with all the different forms of converting. We've done them all. So now I have a little chart for you, and I think you can do this with confidence. If you get stuck, you can always go back and watch any parts of the video. But here it is. You can copy this to some scratch paper and do it, or you can just kind of, I suppose you could always print this up if you needed to. You could somehow try to print it up using your computer. Anyway, so we've got some fractions over there, so you can go from fractions to decimals to percents. We've got a group of percents. You can go from percents to fraction. You can go from percents to decimal. And lastly, we've got some decimals. You can go from decimals to percents or decimals to fractions and fill in this chart gradually. I hope you have fun. I hope you like the video. Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.